Hey guys, Michael the Comic Nerd here again. As keeping to my original goal, I am here to talk about the second Daredevil episode, which is called Cutman. Let's keep in mind I probably will be binge watching these, so if I'm wearing the same shirt for a lot of these videos, that's why. I realize that cup is empty, but it's not at the bottom. But anyway, so Cutman. This show is really on the right track. There's a lot that they do in this episode that I really like. More so than the first episode. I think I like this episode better than the pilot. And I think that's, well, a lot of it is because it doesn't have to set up the atmosphere anymore. It can just kind of run with it. It can start playing with it. And what I like where they're going with this direction, because I feel like since it is a Netflix show, it is a TV show, and it's not one necessarily dictated by, like, goals presented by studio companies or anything like that. They're allowed to do a lot more experimenting. Like, it feels like they're trying to go for, like, an HBO type show with this, which has potential for greatness. I mean, you're not going to see any titties or anything like that in this. At least I don't think so. I'd be really surprised if they did. That would be interesting. At the same time, I was noticing this while I was watching the episode, is the fact that it is definitely darker than anything we've seen from the Marvel Cinematic Universe up to this point, but it also doesn't feel out of place. Like, there's still enough levity and enough, not to say levity, because that makes it sound like they're just throwing in jokes like, oh, wacky, but no, like, the characters feel very much like they can exist in this world that is already been pre-established, and that's very good, and that's very tricky, considering just how different everything else about this series is from what we've seen from Marvel so far. So the fact that they can make it so different and yet so complementary is very, very good. That being said, like, I mean, the episode's not perfect. It has some flaws. But the stuff they get right and the stuff they're willing to try, I really respect. Okay, so a little recap of the episode, because I guess I feel like if I just talk about what I liked and what I didn't like, these vlogs are going to get a little redundant. So I'm going to go over very briefly what the stories are, and we're just going to go from there. So this episode actually introduces us to the Night Nurse, who I am going to Google because I forget who plays her. The Night Nurse, of course, being, I think she was actually introduced in a, no, she wasn't, like a old character back in the 70s, but she was, like, recently reintroduced in a Doctor Strange miniseries, I think, what it was, which is actually a really good book, if you can find it. I forget what it's called, but, if you know, let me know in the comments. But, the one in this one is played by Rosario Dawson, that's what it is. Rosario Dawson, who, I'm not just gonna call myself a huge Rosario Dawson fan, although the stuff I've seen her in I've liked. So, I mean, I think she's a good actress. She just never particularly wowed me either. But, it's interesting, like, Night Nurse, that's another kind of great thing about these TV shows, and, like, even Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. are doing this now with, like, introducing Mr. Hyde, which I fucking called, by the way. I don't know how many people, like, predicted that character's gonna turn out to be Mr. Hyde, but I fucking called it for this first appearance, like, this guy's gonna be Mr. Hyde, you just watch, and I was right, so haha. But anyway, so, in the last episode, I talked about how, Daredevil gets the crap beat out of him, at least in the ending of that episode. I was wrong. He gets the crap beat out of him in this episode, literally, because it starts out with, him being found in the dumpster, with just the shit beaten out of him, and he's bleeding all over the place. He's barely conscious. He gets found by Night Nurse, and by the way, she's not called Night Nurse. She doesn't have like superhero persona or anything like that yet. Although by the end of the episode, they kind of established that she's kind of being like the underground nurse for Daredevil. I'm assuming she's a recurring character, which is cool because like I like the dynamic she has with Matt. I like. It kind of reminds me of the detective on Person of Interest. Kind of the same dynamic is like, okay, I feel like these two can work well with each other. I like the fact that he's kind of expanding his network. I like that Daredevil feels very much like a superhero on a very, very harsh learning curve. And I think that's a good way to take care of it. Like, they even mention, kind of referring to how Daredevil's going to evolve his costume over the course of the first season, is when she discovers him and he finally becomes conscious again, she says something like, so he starts to explain why he was out there and why he was in a dumpster. And she goes, so you're a blind guy who wants to cause trouble for bad people. You're kind of sucking at it. Your costume kind of sucks, by the way, too, she also says. And, because, yeah, it's a work in progress. Like, okay, that was a fun little quip. But the writing, I felt, was sharper in this episode, too. I don't know who wrote this one in comparison to the pilot, but the characters feel a bit more developed. Like I said, they feel more a part of the world than they did in the first episode. Foggy, in particular, he's still a douchebag, but he's a much more likable douchebag in this one, because he has his like own subplot where he goes out with Karen, who was their client that they proved innocent in the first episode, who's now their secretary. And they have some very nice moments together where they kind of go out drinking because she doesn't want to go home because she was framed for murder and almost got murdered there. So, yeah, it kind of makes sense. But they have some very nice moments, and they have a very good dynamic, and they work well with each other. And I like that they're taking the approach to humanize these characters more rather than just going straight to the action. In fact, there is actually very little action in this episode, except for the ending, which I'm going to talk about, because there's some very interesting experimental stuff in that last sequence that Marvel has never done before, and it's definitely worth mentioning. But I was thinking about this, and I also realized that, at least physically, I don't know about emotionally yet, this might be the case, but I don't know yet, it's too early to say, this is definitely the most physically vulnerable superhero we've seen in any of the Marvel characters up to this point, I think. Because, think about any of the Iron Man movies, like, do you really think any of them are in danger? You really think they're going to kill Gwyneth Paltrow or Tony Stark, or any of them was really going to die? No, you don't think that. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., yeah, they're a bit more vulnerable, but they're also quippy, and at the same time, like, the tension's there, but not to an extreme extent. This one, it makes it very clear that Daredevil is very much in the learning stages of becoming a superhero, and he can and does get the shit kicked out of him by potentially anybody. And I really like that, because when the action scenes come up after that fact, there's a lot more tension, because you legitimately don't know if Daredevil's going to win or if he's going to lose. There's a lot more of like, oh shit, what's going to happen? And that's great that they can do that. I love that they're going that direction. It's such the right way to take it. And, like, I've already talked about the lighting in the other episodes. It's still really good here. I thought it was better in the other episode, but, you know, they can't all be perfect. I do, like, I want to go back to Night Nurse a little bit, though, because the one thing I did like about this, other than, like, her slowly being weaned into, like, who Daredevil is and why she wants to help him, it's done in a way that makes sense to an extent. But there was a point where the people that originally beat the crap out of him try to hunt him down to kind of like, you know, finish the job, because Daredevil's looking for the boy that they kidnapped, and they trapped him and they kicked the crap out of him, left him for dead. But they find out he's still alive, so they're looking through this apartment building where Night Nurse is, trying to find him. And Daredevil, just in his, like, barely able to move ability, just still knocks him out with a kind of American Psycho-esque move, where the guy shows up at Night Nurse's door, pretending to be a cop, and she, of course, tries to say, oh, no, everything's fine, but he doesn't believe her. But he doesn't say that he doesn't believe her. Daredevil knows because, of course, he's a human lie detector. So he starts going, fake cop starts going down the stairs, and Daredevil's like, he didn't believe you. I gotta knock him out before he leaves. So he grabs a fire extinguisher and holds it over the stairs and just kind of does, you know that scene in American Psycho where Christian Bale is like lining up the chainsaw to figure out when exactly to drop it? He does that except with the fire extinguisher, and then ties him up to the roof to interrogate him. And, this is actually really kind of funny in a really morbid way, is, Night Nurse initially is like, hey, look, I know you're trying to help people, and I've, like, seen, like, because she works as a nurse, so she sees some of the stuff, like, the bad guys he's beat up, and, like, the people that he's helped save. She's heard these stories of him. She goes, if you're gonna go down this road, I can't condone that. Like, this isn't necessary. We don't need to take it down this road. And Derek was like, okay, I'm kind of digging this. She's kind of calm out of this bullshit. Maybe this can work as, like, she can work as someone to keep him humble and keep him, you know, from going too far in the dark side. But then, then the great part happens where Daredevil's, like, Daredevil basically says, okay, I know you're afraid, let me just teach you some of my ways. So he starts interrogating him, and the fake cop starts spewing, like, the most evil, vile shit he can imagine to say to this guy while she's watching with her face covered so she can't see him. So he can't see her. And then, after a while, Night Nurse just grabs a pair of scissors, walks up to Daredevil, and goes, oh, you want to hit that nerve right above the eye over there. Starts giving him suggestions on where to hurt this guy. And I'm just like, oh, that's fucking great. Oh, that was fantastic. And it's really dark for Marvel to do. I love that they're going more experimental with this stuff. And whether it works or it doesn't, the willingness to try really shows that they're being careful not to remain stagnant. Or not to shake the reputation of just the lighter tone action movies. Like, they're really trying something different here, and I'm digging it. Oh, by the way, in case you were wondering, that Doctor Strange miniseries was called Doctor Strange The Oath, which you should definitely go check out. But anyway, after all that's over, where was I going with this? Oh yeah, the ending. The last thing I'll talk about before I wrap up is there's the final action sequence of the episode is when the gang member tells him where the boy is, and Daredevil, even though he's still, like, incredibly wounded, barely can walk, decides, okay, I'm gonna go there and get him anyway. And so he goes over there, and this is like the first really long, continuous shot. I mean, maybe they snuck a couple cuts in there, but it's really, like, carefully hidden, if they did. I don't know if they did. I'd have to look it up. But, basically, it just one long shot, largely of just this, dank hallway in this dirty building for about 6 to 8 minutes, I think. It's just one long action sequence, one long shot, no cuts, just full choreography as Daredevil is both beating up and getting the crap beat out of him by this large group of henchmen. And it's fucking fantastic. It's kind of trying to do what that incredible shot that True Detective did. And if you've seen that show, you know exactly what shot I'm talking about. It's like one of the most famous shots of the series, and one was like, oh my god, that was amazing. It's not quite that good, but the fact that, again, that they're willing to experiment with these different camera styles, and these different tonal elements, and these different just kinds of characters in general, this really shows that Marvel really wants to grow. I so appreciate that. That they're not just sticking with what works. They're trying to they're testing out what works. You know, they're trying new things. And this show looks like it's a springboard for new ideas on what Marvel can get away with and what they can't get away with. And I think it's a great way to test it out. And yeah, like, come to think of it, there wasn't much about this episode that I didn't like. Maybe, one other thing I want to talk about is, there was a lot to, like, this episode also goes a lot to Daredevil's, like, Batman-esque origin story, and if you know I'm not gonna spoil it, but if you know Daredevil at all, chances are you probably know what's gonna happen. It shows him as a little kid, like helping his father, who of course gets crappied out of him all the time because he's a boxer. And one thing I liked about this also is the fact that so far I've noticed that this episode and the first episode is they honestly talk a lot about what it's like to be a blind person and kind of like the struggles you have to go through and what you learn. Like, this is the first thing I've ever heard, the first thing I've ever seen in movies and television that actually talks about a little bit how Braille works, which is actually kind of cool. By the way, I caught the Creel reference, Creel being, like, the last name of the absorbing man. I doubt they're the same person. That's one that popped in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but they're probably related. I don't know if they'll go into that. It'd be cool if they did. But one thing I liked about the portrayal of Matt Murdock as a kid is that they play him up much as a kid forced to be an adult because of his living circumstances. I mean, he lives in a crappy neighborhood, his dad gets beat up all the time, he lives in a violent world, and the way this kid acts it out, and the kid's a good actor too, it's worth noting, he really acts like he has to be the adult. He has to take care of his dad, and as much as he has to take care of himself, he really has to be self-reliant, and rather than relying on other people. And that's really refreshing, actually. Again, that's not something you see in a lot of superhero TV shows or superhero movies. You don't see that very often, and it feels very fitting to Daredevil's character. So again, there's a lot of elements I feel like they're doing very right. Now the more I talk about it, the more I realize I like this episode a lot more than I thought I did. But I'm really excited to see where it's going. So, yeah, that's all I got for this one. So let's check out the next episode. Yay!